The Pig from Hell. In certain parts of Dublin, parents never threaten their children with the bogeyman. Instead they say, "Watch out, or the Dolacha will get you." Few youngsters dare ask exactly what the Dolacha might be, which is just as well, really, because the story of this ghostly monster is one of the most frightening you will ever hear in Ireland. It even starts in hell. Hell was the name given in the old days to a district of Dublin with cobbled streets, narrow alleys, and a great many dark and dismal corners. It also contained a gloomy prison, known as the Black Dog Jail. And if hell itself was generally dismal, then the Black Dog was as grim as it gets. Only the most notorious of Irish convicts served their sentence in the Black Dog. And of this unsavory bunch, there was none worse than a villain named Ollachar, who was in prison awaiting hanging for the murder of a woman. But Ollachar never hanged. A few days before his execution date, he cheated the gallows by committing suicide. And it was then the trouble started. On the night Ollachar died, one of the guards at the Black Dog Jail was found unconscious at his post, barely alive, and with his body horribly mutilated. A doctor was called, and the guard eventually came too. He had, he said, been attacked by a monstrous black pig. The monstrous black pig was soon the talk of every tavern in the city. Where had it come from? How had it got into the prison? Where did it go? It was obvious that this could be no ordinary pig. It had to be some sort of phantom, some sort of ghost, some sort of supernatural entity that stalked the corridors of the Black Dog after dark. The talk reached runaway proportions when the nervous citizens of hell learned about a second incident in the jail, just one day later. Another guard vanished without trace. His gun was found lying on the floor by his sentry post, as were all his clothes. But the man himself was nowhere to be seen. People reached the terrifying conclusion that he'd been eaten by the phantom pig. If it had ended there, the talk would have died away eventually. But end there it certainly did not. Soon women and girls throughout Dublin began to report seeing a huge black pig which roamed the city after dark. At first, the authorities put the sightings down to hysteria. Then the attacks began. They were vicious, brutal attacks. They came only after dark, and they were aimed only at women. There was no longer any question of hysteria or imagination. The injuries suffered by the victims were all too real. Many were mauled as savagely as the guard in the jail, and all of them claimed to have been attacked by an enormous black pig. The people of Dublin talked about it endlessly and came up with a fantastic theory that it was Ollachar, the suicide, who had murdered the woman, who had now returned from the grave in the form of a monstrous pig and was wreaking his revenge on a city that tried to hang him. The authorities, of course, could not afford to listen to this nonsense, but they knew something had to be done, and so they put special patrols on the streets, concentrating on the Hell District, especially that area of hell around the Black Dog Jail. And women were warned to stay indoors after dark. It made no difference. There were always some people who had to go out at night, and, despite the patrols, the attacks continued. In the way that words become distorted, the pig-like ghost of the murderer Ollachar became known simply as the Dolacha. Everyone knew the Dolacha was the most dangerous phantom to stalk Dublin throughout that city's long and sometimes violent history. The attacks continued through the dark winter and then stopped with the coming of spring. People slowly relaxed, and eventually the story of the Dolacha sank into city folklore. But then something happened that added further mystery to this very unpleasant tale. A burly blacksmith walking home one night happened to be wearing a woman's cloak that he'd borrowed to keep off the rain. He turned into a dark alley and was attacked. But as he was a strong man, he managed to overcome his attacker, who turned out to be the missing guard from the Black Dog jail, wrapped in the flayed skin of a monstrously large black pig.